All right, guys, thanks for coming. I've got a list of questions we're going to start with. We'll go down the line. Once we're done with those questions, we'll kind of go into the audience, any questions you guys have, and we'll kind of follow that format, and we'll take it off from there. Our first question for our expert panel, and I guess before I do that, I should probably introduce everybody, and they can do a little tidbit about themselves. Ralph Kramer.
Yeah, that's me. Let's see. I had the great fortune to be involved with public relations at Chevrolet from 79 to 94, and that, if you think back at that time frame, we did some kind of nifty things, including the introduction of the ZR1. So that's my claim to fame.
Dave McClellan.
Yeah, Ralph was my PR guy. Am I doing that?
Well,
I don't know.
It's your General Motors comment.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
All right.
Hey, it must be.
Well, engineering director for Corvette from 1975, probably before most of you were born, to 1992.
And Will Cooksey.
Yes, and I was a plant manager for the Corvette manufacturing operations from 1993 to 2008. So I would hope that I touched a lot of Corvettes during that time, made a lot of people happy.
Amen.
And Mike Yeager.
Chief cheerleader, Mid-America Motorworks.
Easy enough. And Reeves Callaway.
I had the good fortune to be picking up the telephone when Dave McClellan called in 1985 asking if we would be interested in turbocharging a few Corvettes. That was my good fortune. And then I got to work with Ralph and Will and all of the fine people over the subsequent years. So talk about good fortune.
And Randy Leffingwell.
I'm another man with very good fortune. I've had the great thrill to write about all of these guys. I'm a book author.
Kevin Mackay.
I have a company called Corvette Repair in Long Island, New York. Been doing it for almost 30 years, and I have also great fortune. I worked on some really very significant cars with great history.
And Lance Miller.
Well, I grew up in this hobby since I was this big, as Mike will put it, and just always enjoyed it and was around everybody growing up and really got to know them well, and I guess they call you an expert at that point. So I don't consider myself an expert, but hey, I'm here and having fun.
Good deal. We'll start on my right-hand side with Lance with the first question.
Thanks.
That's good.
No problem. Corvette is now 60 years old. If you had to choose one from the first generation, we'll call that 53 to 82, and one from 84 to current, which one of each generation would you choose to drive and why?
I'm pretty biased. The number 3 Cunningham Corvette that's sitting up there, that's real easy. Easy. Check out the Quest. That'll show you the reason why. There's just a long background. I'm a guy that likes stories behind the cars, and that one has one heck of a story.
What about 83 to current?
83 to current. Let me see. Probably the Earnhardt C5R. Again, father-son. Love that background, so that would be my choice.
Not a bad way to go. Kevin?
60. Probably my Penske Corvette. I've wanted that car so badly since 1983, and I've been very fortunate and blessed to get it in 2001. And on a newer model, probably the newest model, I think it'd be kind of cool to drive one, maybe a 427.
For me, it'd be a 67 Coupe, 350, air-conditioned, civilized. I live in California where I want the air conditioning. And then in a modern car, I actually got to drive one of the 20 prototype 89 ZR1s. I'd love to have one of those.
I can see that the 65 split window coupe that we won the FIA championship in 90, 91, and 92 would be the early car. That was a replica of the Dick Gulfstrand Le Mans car. And for the late model car, I can't help but think that it would be the last car that rolled off the production line for us, the 25th anniversary B2K Callaway supercharged version of the car. I think it's by far the best thing we've ever built, and I'm also sure it's the best and brightest that Chevrolet has built.
I'll move to my left side.
67 convertible, small block side pipes that have to be marina blue with the white interior. Happens to be what my first Corvette looked like in 1970. So that would take that generation, and the next one would be a brand new ZR1.
Yeah, my very first Corvette was a 69, black on black. Wished I had it back, but when I went to work for General Motors, I sold it because General Motors gave me so many opportunities to buy new cars. And then, of course, the newer one is the Will Cooksey 427 Special Edition, which
We didn't anticipate that, Will.
I just want to make certain that I pick my own car. Thanks.
You're up, Dave.
I'm going to give a seminar at 1 o'clock and be talking about the first racing cycle that the Corvette was involved with. Seriously, the 1956 Sebring race, and that ties John Fitch and Briggs Cunningham to the Corvette, and the number 3 car from Le Mans came a little later, but there's that same connection with John Fitch and Briggs Cunningham. One of the opportunities that I had a number of years ago, in fact, it was while I was writing the book, was to at a NCRS meeting in Western Pennsylvania, get to drive a 54 and a 55, a 56. And a 71, to just drive some of the old cars that were in pristine show condition. And the 54, I tell the story in the book, and it's a longer story than I will repeat here, but on bias ply tires, that car just wobbled and wandered all over the road, and you couldn't predict which way it was going to go when they put the brakes on. Very typical of cars of that era on bias ply tires. And I was so frustrated after this drive on mountainous kind of Pennsylvania roads that I jumped in my contemporary Corvette that I had driven there, and just drove the same roads to make sure that it wasn't the road, that it was the car. So I would set aside the early cars. My favorite car is the ZR1, and I own a ZR1, so I'd have to say that any of the ZR1s, mine is a 95, and they're still spectacular cars today.
Well, let me just tell you that back at Amelia Island, and I think it was like 05, maybe some of you might have been there, we had all 5 Grand Sports down there. Anybody there that weekend? You might remember it rained. It rained cats and dogs, is I guess what they do down in Florida down at that time. And I was scheduled to drive one of those Grand Sports from the transporter, to the hotel. That's like a couple hundred yards. And then it rained, and so I never got to do that. So I'd say that for the early car, getting a chance to drive one of those 5 Grand Sports, 4 of which are actually running, would be my ideal for that early version. Late one, I don't know, anything that costs more than $100,000, you want to be real careful about. I'm not sure how much fun you can have with a car like that, but that'd be my choice.
What Ralph doesn't remember is that the prototypes that he would be driving around were actually $1 million cars.
Well, yes, but for a couple hundred yards, you're.
That was just a daily job.
By the way, the Grand Sports, here we are, what is it, September 62, 2012. You roll the clock back 50 years, 1/2 century, and right about now is when Duntoff and the little gang of people that were the rogue engineers of which McClellan, turned out to be one a little bit later. We're actually building up those, getting the parts together to put those 5 cars together, which ended up running for the first time in early 60 or late 63, I guess it was. So it was about almost exactly 50 years ago today when those guys were working on those Grand Sports. Just a little history lesson there.
Thanks, guys. So, over essentially 60 years, we've had over 1.5 million Corvettes. And you hear a lot of people talking about that's the next collector car, or this is the next collector car, which leads us to the next question. Of all the Corvettes made, what do you think the biggest underdog Corvette investment is throughout the hobby?
This is the easiest question ever, and this is the one you guys are all waiting for. It's definitely the 2012 Carlisle Blue Corvette. Then you get free entry to Corvettes at Carlisle forever. Think of that investment, guys. No, in all seriousness, there's a lot of different options out there. I love the Corvette Challenge cars. I'm a race car fanatic. I love the history behind each race, each driver. There's so much there. So that's what gets my blood pumping. I definitely would lean towards the Corvette Challenge cars for sure.
Kevin, that would be your next.
Kevin's a little slow.
I don't know if I can top that one. I think the next thing in my life I like to do is maybe focus on some of these early drag cars. I think they're going to give you a real seriously good investment. There are not many out there for sure. I think the typical long endurance race cars are really taking off in value, but I think the next underdog would be the old early drag cars, especially the straight axle drag cars. I think it'd be really cool to have.
Randy?
I'm going to take it to the street and say the 73 to 77 production cars. I think that there's a market out there for them that is just coming awake.
I'm pretty sure that if low numbers mean anything, all of the RPO B2K cars, the Callaway cars built in the early series and the later series, both stand a good chance of being highly valued in the future.
Can I have 3? I concur with Kevin on the drag cars. I also think an underdog, and certainly those of us in the Midwest know little about it, are early Bonneville cars. There's quite a few Bonneville cars that set records. They're interesting cars, what they had to do to the aerodynamics of the cars to get them to run that 200 plus speed. I've never seen one out in the Corvette community. Have any of you guys seen one other than current stuff, but historical ones? And then I'm a firm believer, and I just spent 15-20 minutes with Ralph Kramer a while ago talking about, I think there's so much value in C4 Corvettes. When you look at the Playboy series, the Escort series, and then the Corvette Challenge into the World Challenge. Everybody's talking about race cars. Well, if you buy the race cars that are all the rage today, they're expensive. If you look at that C4 generation, those SCCA cars, they had all the factory support, and they're undervalued. I mean, if I had to go out and say, if I were buying a Corvette for a future investment, I would look at an endurance series. I'd certainly look at the Corvette Challenge series, and some of those C4 cars that are out there. I mean, there's a bunch of them out there and available.
Yep. As a matter of fact, I would agree with Mike 100%. I can recall there was one time when we in the plant, we got a request from Chevrolet to build, I think it was 25 Challenge cars. We built them special ops, and we shipped them out, and they would not be, you couldn't sell them to anybody that wasn't going to race them. And that was the only time that we ever did that. We had to do a lot of unusual things in the plant to try to build those cars. And we've been asked since, when I was manager, why don't we build some more? But GM hadn't decided to do that. But if you could get your hands on one of those and hold it, I mean, we're talking about value. The only time in history it was ever done, and they were only sold to people who were willing to race the car. And I know we still got them out there and about.
Yeah, I would have to say the C4s, particularly the early ZR1s, would be great bargains. And we need to ask Reeves about going 258 with his C4 sledgehammer, because That's the fastest ZR1 or fastest C4 that I'm aware of.
Oh, slick.
Where is that car?
That car is in a collection in Colorado, Ralph.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I think it's already sort of jumped out of the water as far as value
Yeah.
goes. It's already too highly valued to be the underdog. It's maybe the overdog.
It's overdog.
Well, I think Will is talking about the so-called box cars.
Yeah.
Which were 99. Actually, they were 2000 2000 model year cars built in November of 99.
Yeah.
20 of them first, and then I think maybe a few more after that. And you know, those cars are also becoming, the few that are out there are pretty well known, and that's going up in price. But somebody yesterday in a seminar that Dave had mentioned about an automatic transmission in a what was that?
Z06.
Z06, which doesn't allegedly exist,
not
but there was supposed to be one at Bowling Green
I didn't
a couple weeks ago. So that would be the one car that I would say.
Will's up here denying that they built it. I didn't build that.
I didn't have anything to do with it. Must be a mistake.
You talk about these and Kevin Mackay and Lance. These C4 race cars, they have the same kind of paper trail that Kevin, the ultimate Corvette sleuth, has managed to capture other cars with. I mean, they've got they were serial number designated. There was a code, an RPO code for those cars, and a lot of them were turned back into stock. So they're out there running around. Yep. And those are going to be the finding one of those cars or more is going to be a nifty trick.
I can tell us secret out of school today, I think.
You're just going to tell a secret that everybody can hear.
That it will now no
long as
longer
we don't
be
tell
a
it to anybody
secret.
else, then we're
Maybe we
okay.
should put this in the category of dirty little secret.
Now everybody wants to hear it, Reeves.
I don't think this has ever been publicly spoken about before, but it follows the boxcar theme. There were more boxcars built. Well, I think it was after, later in 2006, we had made a request for cars in white to become FIA GT cars for racing in Europe. And what we needed was a C6 with a ZR1 driveline in it. Not with the engine, but with the differential and gearbox. And somehow, I don't remember who it was that managed to put it through the system, but it got through the system. The cars were built. They were all devoid of serial numbers, and they were shipped directly to Germany, to our shop in Germany. But there has to be a paper trail somewhere for those 5, 6, 7 FIA GT cars. So that's a really little known secret.
See Mackay down there right now. The wheels are turning right now.
Where'd Mackay go?
He's on the phone. Sorry.
I'll never tell.
Well, I was following my questions in order, and it seemed that everybody kind of touched on the challenge cars, and you know, to go into the box cars they built. You saw all those cars in the early 2000s race in the World Challenge and what was at the time the Motorola Cup that was sanctioned by Grand Am. So I'll kind of skip ahead, and Ferrari has the Ferrari Challenge. They're factory-built race cars delivered to dealerships, raced by privateers. Porsche has the Porsche Cup. Same concept. You have cars that are made by Porsche, shipped to dealerships, raced in a series sanctioned by Porsche. We know Corvette had that in 88 and 89 after they were kicked out of the SCCA for being entirely way too dominant. So which leads me to my next question, guys. With the C7 coming out, is it possible, and would it be supported by a customer base, which I think would go beyond just Corvette customers, to build a Corvette Challenge car? I know your answer.
Yeah, that'd be a tough one. I'm in. Sign me up.
I'm a lousy driver. I just like to be a spectator when this has happened, to be honest with you. 'Cause
I can vouch from last night.
I'd love that for a new chapter for the book.
We already summarized this, put it in paper, and put it under Mark Royce's nose a year ago. So we just haven't gotten an answer yet. That's all.
Kevin can get it turned into French. Maybe that's the problem. I think a series dedicated to Corvette would definitely be a winner, especially the ride and drive style where you buy the car and like the Cup Challenge and Porsche.
Yeah, today in GM, I would say that that could very well happen at some point in time. It seems that the leadership is more open-minded about doing some of those kind of things, more so than maybe some of the people who are not there now. So it's very possible.
Dave?
Well, they've got a lot of GM has a lot of experience with the Pratt & Miller cars, and their latest C6R is much closer to the production car than the prior art race cars. So I think it would be something that would be very doable and would make a lot of sense. The problem you have there's a problem racing yourself, and that is getting all the cars equal, and we worked hard to do that back with the Corvette Challenge series. The problem when you're running against real competitors is that the series organizers put some severe penalties on the Corvettes. I mean, when a C6R Corvette is running at just over 5 liters and having to suck through an intake restrictor, that's in a strong sense not very fair, because you wonder why are Corvettes and Porsches and Mazdas and all kinds of stuff showing essentially equal performance, and the reason is that the series organizers force that on you. So it's going to be a real challenge to GM to figure out where do you want to showcase your car, and personally, I would not showcase it in competitive racing other than the Le Mans style stuff, because it doesn't let you really show what you're capable of producing.
I'm afraid that I would say it'll never happen. I'm going back to the Corvette Challenge, the difficulties we had there financially and with support within the company. It's a wonder that thing got off the ground. I'd also say if it would have lasted 1 or 2 more years, it would still be going today. We were right on the edge of breaking through to get some real high dollar and high level involvement, and also remove Chevrolet from having to pick up any of the expenses. And unfortunately, the legs got chopped out from under it. So you go forward to today. Is the General Motors of today, are the guys up there, can they see themselves being like Porsche and Ferrari, where you've got that kind of a camaraderie with some of your key customers to the point where you're willing to try to create a situation for them to go play, or is the focus more on paying the government back, selling everything you can build, and making fuel economy numbers with Sonics and little cruises? And I'm afraid Mark Royce is going to be sitting for a long time on that proposal. But it's a great idea. Somebody else could do it. Somebody else could do it. Some outside outfit like Mid-America, maybe.
I think the gentleman to my right would be a great candidate. All right, I'll stop with what my dad would call the layup questions. Corvette's made a lot of great decisions, great cars over 60 years.
Racing and losing.
But like any brand, they've definitely had their faults, which leads me to my next question. As a brand, what is the biggest mistake Corvette has made? Lance?
Let's start with Kevin on that one. That's a tough question. It really is.
What's the question?
I think the brand as a whole is very solid. I'd like to see it more steered towards children. The early generations.
Like a cheaper model, if you will, to get younger kids involved.
Yeah, I think so, but I think there's also a market there for used cars. You know, look at the C4s, the C5s. There's some incredible performance for the money. So let's get them there in the seat.
Kevin?
Are you talking about the new cars?
I'm talking about from 53 to 2013. Anything.
Knowing I was born and raised in New York all my life, I'm very confused why the early Corvettes from like 53 to 55 didn't have outside door handles and locks on the cars. That's what I want to know. Think about it. I mean, how simple it was to take a car back then.
Yeah.
I mean, they had the little side curtains, that was it. But if you didn't put those back in the car, those cars were gone pretty easily.
Styling.
And most of them were gone. But that's what's confusing me for some reason. Why would they design a car without a key on the door?
Very true.
Well, Harley Earl never visited. He got to Watkins Glen. That was the closest he got to the big city. So he wasn't familiar with the behaviors down there.
Randy?
It seems to me there was a period of time in the C3, C4 transition when the company sort of got confused once again about what the car was. There was a great quote from Ed Cole back in the 50s. We don't know whether the car is a boulevard cruiser or a racetrack tiger. And I think that the anchor came adrift. And as the company tried to, as Dave has written eloquently about the problems of solving emissions and solving safety, from what I can understand from the conversations I've had, you all were hanging on for dear life. And I don't sense that the corporation supported you guys. They gave you enough to do the least you could possibly do, and the car kind of lost its identity.
Interesting. Reeves?
I think two things. One is I don't think you get good until you make a few mistakes. So I would be the last person to try to pinpoint a mistake that somebody in the car business has made, because it is probably the world's toughest business. But on the other side, General Motors, Chevrolet, especially Corvette, has cracked a code that nobody else in the car business has cracked. And that is, they have found a way to make a $100,000 automobile for $50,000. Nobody in the car business does as good a job at bringing that value to the table. Give me $200,000 and it's pretty easy to make you an exciting automobile. But I can't make you a $200,000 automobile for 50 grand. That's General Motors territory. They're the only people on the planet who have cracked that code. You know, a C6 made in Stuttgart is going to be a $90,000 car, just like a 911 is. So my hat is really off to not the flaws that we may be able to look at, but to the real underlying success story that is represented by the Corvette. However, there's one thing that gets my personal goat. And that is when cars fall into the category of stickers and stitches instead of some sort of authentic modification. And I think that we, as the American car industry, tend to accept watered-down versions of things that are a vision of something that aren't really the genuine article. So that's my statement about the industry, not just about the Corvette. Sorry, I'll get off the soapbox now.
Randy had a quick comment.
You know, the analogy to Porsche is very interesting. My next book project is a 50-year history of the Porsche 911. I've been spending a lot of time at the factory working on a racing history for them. Some of the biggest fans in the world of the Porsche C5, 6, and 7 are Weissach, the engineering center at Porsche. There's a man named August Achleitner, who is the head of development for all 911 projects, and I spent 3 hours with him in June. And one of the things he said was they are the most anxious customer for the first C7 in Europe. They have benchmarked Corvettes for 10 years now because they admire how Corvette does the weight issue and how Corvette provides so much performance for the dollar. That is something they respect highly, and they are most anxious to see what the next car looks like.
Oh, very interesting. Had no clue about that. Mike?
I'm not sure I can fault the brand because in any way. I think when I look at the 53 Corvette up to the 2013, personally, I think the car has been on target from day one to today. And my version of that, Michael, is that when it came out, it was our version of a sports car. No one else's version. It was General Motors and America's version. It's transitioned some, but I think the car's on target from 53 to current car. Otherwise, you wouldn't have this gathering of people. If that car hadn't been kept on brand for what brand was at the time, I think the interest would have waned on Corvette a long time ago. But because if you have a Corvette, it doesn't matter what year you have, you're part of the club, so to speak. So if the car had been off-brand, it's like, well, I own this year and that's cool, but you own that year and that's not cool. So, I could probably pick personal little things, but if I have to look in a global position, I think the car has been America's expression of a rear-wheel drive, front-engine, high-performance sports car for whatever a sports car was at that time. It's not a rear-engine 911. It's America's sports car.
Heard some great comments here. As a matter of fact, I agree with everything that I've heard. Of course, the only thing that I'm concerned with is that in the early years, how it was looked at that you need to be a small person to ride Corvettes, and I think that was a serious mistake. They should have made these Corvettes where folks like me could get in them, and so when we came out with C5, we did a lot of finessing to make certain that C5 could fit average folks, and I've had a lot of people say, thank you very much.
Will, you're far beyond average. And I mean that in the nicest way.
I was sitting here thinking, Dave, what's this guy's average?
I'm from Texas.
So you get in a Corvette today and you wonder, why is there so much room in here? Well,
Blame Will.
between he and Joe Spielman, you find the answer. The big guys took over.
Don't shrink them.
I don't think the Corvette ever lost its way. I think that once Duntoff got a hold of the car, and the earliest Corvettes that Zora took claim for were the 56s. He does not take any claim on particularly the six-cylinder cars. But once Duntoff took charge of the car and started to make it his own, in his own image, if you will, I think we've had a pretty clear message as to what the car is and ought to be, and we follow that image generation after generation. There's times in there when we weren't able to deliver everything that we wanted to deliver. Fuel economy rules, emission rules, the technologies that we had to work with were inadequate to that. But we worked our way out of that, and you look at a Z06 or a ZR1 today, and I use the Nürburgring as the best measure of what kind of car are we producing, and this current ZR1 is a 7-minute, 19-second car for the long Nürburgring, and that is as fast as any of the exotic cars. There's race cars that are a little faster than that, but not even very much. So as a stock bone stock production car, that's incredible. It actually is incredible, and that's what Corvettes do and what they do best.
Ralph?
Yeah, I agree. I especially agree with Reeves and Mike. The ironies and the dichotomies around the Corvette are just so numerous that you can't even begin to get your arms around them. Clearly the car was a distraction, okay, back in the very beginning. The dealers, they didn't know what to do with it. Customers didn't know what to do with it. You move forward, you had financial problems. In Dave's era, he was, so then you look at how, these things kind of kind of flow together and separate, and the car and the brand continues to kind of manage to get through it all. But on the one hand, Dave had the only, correct me if I'm wrong, but in '84, after one of the major reorganizations at General Motors, the Corvette engineering group remained intact. Isn't that correct? And you guys had your own engineering group.
We did.
The only group within Chevrolet that happened to. So that's a big plus. The minus was the car was so minuscule in almost every measure. I mean, it didn't. The money was so small that nobody paid attention to. You go to a staff meeting, McClellan would come in and talk about the Corvette, and we had all these other major problems on our hands, and so okay, let him do whatever he wanted to do. Well, God love him, he did. Okay. and so then you move on forward, and you got those moments in the early '90s when the car became what the key word was essential. Is this car essential to General Motors? Answer: no. Okay, and the car came so close to going away in a period of time in that 90-91 time frame that it's scary even to think about it. And you move forward now another, what are we talking, 20 years, and the Corvette has taken on a world stature that I think it's safe to say hardly any of us even thought about back in the 80s. So today it's this enormous halo. It's got, even despite all of its the adversity that's gone through, maybe because of it, it's what it is today. And I'd say the brand today on the world stage is stronger than ever. At the same time, at the grassroots level in this country, especially from a performance standpoint, I worry about whether the decision in '96 or '7 to go with a factory racing team actually, helped or hurt the total grassroots kind of the fabric at that point. Did we forget the guys that brought us to that point? I'm not sure about that, but the brand, no question, today is bigger than ever.
Yeah, I have to tell you a short story about producing a low budget, low price Corvette. The car does go through these sales ups and downs, and Jim Perkins was struggling in one of the downs and asked us to put together a version of the car that had went from fuel injection back to carburetor. Had roll-up windows with a crank, and he thought of a whole bunch of smaller displacement motor, because in the pricing model he could get a cheaper price out of that. And we codenamed the car the Billy Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we actually the parts
But not
actually
to Jim's face. We never called it Billy Bob to Jim's face.
That's quite true. The parts actually got produced and were ultimately used in the first of the Z06 Corvettes with a solid roof. And it actually turned out, I talked to one of the engineers that was responsible for that roof system, and it cost more than the convertible roof to do, because it was a magnesium subframe that they put up there with skin on it, and it was not actually cheaper than anything else. But in so many ways, it just doesn't make sense to produce a cheapened Corvette, because the marketplace soon figures out that you've scaled it back in some way or other, and it's not a car that you can be proud of. And that's the quandary we run into there. We want to keep the price point as competitive as we possibly can, but it wants to be the pricing of all Corvettes, and they want to be very even the standard Corvette wants to be an exceptional performance car right out of the box.
Guys, one of the things that we hear a lot at Mid-America, be it at Bloomington Gold, Carlisle, we see a lot of people and hear a lot of people say, this is my first Corvette, I'm finally retired, I bought my dream car. Or we hear, I've been saving up, I finally have got enough money to buy a used C4, I'm putting new parts on it, we're gonna go. So with that question, what advice do you have to someone who's just now entering the hobby? It's their first Corvette. What advice would you give them?
Go to as many car shows as you possibly can. And I'm serious about it. Just go out there and talk to the people, get to know them. It's amazing the network that you grow when you go to these shows. And truly, I mean, everybody at the tables here are very approachable people, and they're happy to share their knowledge. That's what it's all about. So I'd highly recommend go to the shows, talk to the people, get to know other people, and all of a sudden it's a huge network, and it's fun.
You know, you have the internet, which is a lot of knowledge there for sure. And the more questions you ask, the more knowledge you receive. But getting into this hobby, it's a wonderful hobby to be involved with. But I agree with Lance. I mean, you go to a lot of these events here. I mean, they're all over the place, not just all out of state. I mean, there's got to be enough car shows in your local area. They got these cruise nights on the weekends, which is very popular, at least where I am anyway. We're probably all over the world now, where there's hundreds of people that just gather together and you ask a lot of questions, get a lot of knowledge. It's that simple.
I agree with both these guys. If you get a car, plan a long road trip. Go to every car show you can in it. Talk to everybody you meet about it. Enjoy the car. They're meant to be driven. They're meant to be used. Drive it.
Gee, I think we're really fortunate to be in the day of the internet, because imagine that the world's library of information is available at your fingertips night or day. I mean, that is a remarkable jump ahead in what it takes to know about these automobiles. So.
Mid-America wouldn't exist without Corvette clubs. My history, my culture in starting Mid-America Motorworks was because I had started a Corvette club, got associated with other Corvette clubs, from NCCC to NCRS, and then the regional and area clubs. I'm a firm believer if you're a first-time Corvette owner, you've got to get involved in a Corvette club, because that's where you find the people just like you. And I have yet to ever have a problem with a Corvette that you can't find someone that has either had the same problem or solved it. And that's my association's always been through Corvette clubs.
And I can tell you what, I agree with everything that's been said. I would say the same thing, so I'm not going to say it. Thank you.
That's where we put you and I down this end, Will.
If I were just starting out and had to pick a Corvette that I could afford to get into, I think I would pick probably an 85 Corvette. We had our act together with that car. If you want a convertible, you have to go a little further out into the 86 or 87 to find an economical car that you can afford as a starting reference point. And I totally agree with the club aspect of it, that connecting together on the internet with the registries gives you a window on a very important world to help you maintain and build performance in your car. And the clubs give you a network of really interesting people to get to know. These Corvette folks are, I must say, fun to be around.
Yeah, join a club, and when you look around at the club and you find everybody there could be your grandfather or your grandmother, don't let that stop you, because it turns out that those people are pretty friendly also.
Hey, Ralph,
I was prematurely white-haired.
Speaking of your grandmother, so to speak, Ralph and I said a while ago, we were visiting. We are on a mission today. Your idea, not mine. You go with it. You know what I'm talking about. And
yeah.
Let's just see if we can recruit some.
I want to know out there, let's see, how do I put this? Of all you Corvette owners that are around here, who is under the age of 30? Show of hands, 30.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Under 30.
He's on the stage.
Okay, you two guys don't count. Under 35. 40. 40, 45, 45, 45. 145 here.
There's one over there.
Do you know of anybody here who's under the age of 30? An owner of a car? Come on, I need a candidate. Somebody want to fake it? Okay, well,
we're just local on this PA, but
yeah.
Ralph had mentioned this morning about finding the youngest owners here. We found a 28-year-old guy and gal, They don't have their 73 with them. But
We said go home and get it.
Did they leave?
No.
But at 3 o'clock when we're doing awards, we're going to see if we can find the youngest people here that own a Corvette.
See, I've got it.
The youngest people here are going to own all these Corvettes at some time. It's not going to be us.
I worry, I guess, gee, it's, about what's happening with the demographics here, and so I thought I got to do a celebrity pick here in a minute of a car, and I really, I'm looking for the youngest owner. I don't care what the car looks like, because I'm afraid there's our future right there. We gotta find a way to make those young people feel good about owning Corvettes.
Guys, I'm going to do one more round of questions up here, then I'm going to hand it over to you to ask any questions. With that said, barn finds are probably one of the new rages in the industry. Do you guys prefer to keep them as is? If you pull them out of the barn, are you big candidates of restoring them, putting them back on the road, and driving them? Or would you say it's more of a wait and see and just kind of play it out?
I think you mix them all up. You keep it as is, show it off a bit. Mike, you have a great example in my museum. You know what? Show it off. Let people enjoy it. Check it out. I love when they're grungy and dirty. There's nothing cooler, but some people don't like that. I respect that as well. But another neat thing is go through the transformation. Kevin does a great job with a cutaway car, and it shows you the internals of the vehicle. It's cool. Then all of a sudden, it'll be restored, 5 years later. So why not go through it and enjoy every process?
Even though I'm in the restoration business, I love cars that are basically just untouched, because that's where all the knowledge is, that's where all the history is, for sure. We were fortunate enough to find the #1 Briggs Cunningham Le Mans car, and we debuted it privately at Carlisle, as is. We didn't vacuum it, we didn't wash it, never cleaned anything, we just left it as is as a real barn find. So there's a lot of history right there, and a lot of learning experience, and what's nice about that, show it up for a while, you can always restore it down the pike. But I also agree with Lance that it's nice to take a car. If it's a true survivor, leave it like that for the rest of its life. This barn find Le Mans car was all modified and customized over the years. So down the pike, we all are planning to restore the car for sure. But for now, just show it as is. I think it's a lot of fun to do that.
I'm a pretty strict preservationist. I love history. I love finding the barn finds, finding the time capsules, because there's so much to learn from them. At the point when a wheel falls off, you may want to think about restoration. But if you don't have to, I'd rather see it in all of its luster and its sheen.
I only get to work on new cars, but my preference would be to leave them as they are. The survivor thing really is appealing, I think.
I know your answer, so.
Well, we have the 57 barn find over in my garage, and I was actually going to wash it 2 years ago after 37 years of sitting in a barn. I was going to wash it here at Corvette Funfest, and our customers through Facebook and email said, leave it as it is. And when it sits in the My Garage Museum, I love to stand behind people that are looking at the car and listen to what they're saying about it, because it's a 57 with a 61 motor in it, and if it were restored, it would be a restored 57. Sitting the way it is with all the dirt, the possum tracks on the trunks, the pots and pans, and it just elicits lots of comments. So from my perspective, keeping it in a museum, it's just kind of fun to have it there. So I would say leave barn finds as barn finds. Let the next owner decide.
Well, it's a tough act to follow, because, what I would rather see happen is a scrapbook made, documenting everything that you're talking about as far as the find and the history of the vehicle. But then I'd like to see a schedule put for restoration, because I think I'd like to see all those Corvettes back out on the road, rolling, making people happy, just like the ones that we're building today.
Yeah, my only advice is drive it, and drive it like you stole it.
Well, we're talking about, I think, two different things here. We're talking about cars, or we're talking about art. Okay, if it's a work of art, then you gotta treat it like that. If it's a car, then turn it back into a car and do what cars are supposed to do. And the decision or the question is, what is it? Kevin, I'm reminded of Justo's car. This is what was that, a 57 Sebring car that is very original, had a lot of interesting stuff on it. And I don't know where he is in the restoration on that car right now, but back a couple years ago when we kind of were looking at that car, the thought was, gee, it's too bad that you can't find a way to restore that car, clean it up, but leave all those really interesting pieces and parts so that we can all kind of appreciate them. And that means that, of course, you're not going to run it like that. So it's not a car; it's a work of art. So finding out where you are now, what's your decision?
All right. With that said, who in the audience has questions? And I'll walk to you with a mic. So bear with me here, and I'll jump down.
I used to do all that.
What's your name?
Bruce, testing.
Okay, good. Go ahead, Bruce.
Well, I hope this is appropriate, folks, but I'd love to drive a very high-performance Corvette around a track or so. Are there places in central U.S. that I could go get a fairly good deal at being able to go exploit my mentality as hard as I wanted to in a somewhat safe manner?
Sure. Spring Mountain uses Corvettes as the training ground, just outside Las Vegas. Yep, perfect destination. So does Bondurant. Bondurant has Corvettes.
Are you talking about your car, driving your car, or renting a car to do that?
No, sir. Mine's not near as performance enough as I'd like it to be. So I could do it, but I'd probably go full tilt.
Getting in a car at a driver's school or something like that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can personally say if you have not ever done a driver's school and you have a new Corvette, your car will outdrive you 99% of the time. So if you haven't gone, I would highly recommend going to be it Spring Mountain, Bondurant, any of these schools. You'll be amazed, A, what you can learn, and B, what the car can do, because I guarantee you these new Corvettes, and even back to the late C4s, will do more than you ever thought they could, it's pretty incredible once you get them on the track.
That's true.
What is the market price of that, gentlemen? Roughly, Bondurant or Spring Mountain?
You're going to spend about $600 or $700 a day. Okay. Really a good deal.
Okay.
It's an arrival.
And it's their car, remember?
It's their car. Yeah. Leave your car home.
Buy the insurance.
Definitely.
Is Putnam Park still doing track days over there in
Putnam Park still does track days, yes.
Yeah, it's a nice track.
What's your name?
Jim Berger. Hello, gentlemen. Just a quick question concerning Mr. Zorakis Duntov. When he retired from Chevrolet working on the Corvette, did he retire a little early? I guess it's geared towards you, Mr. McClellan. Did he retire a little early? Was he disenchanted with the automotive industry because of the emissions restrictions and the detuning of the cars and stuff like that? Did he feel as though it was time for him to move on because they just couldn't get as much out of the Corvette from his era as maybe he believed? Would you say that he left a little early because of that?
No. No, he took a normal age 65 retirement.
Okay.
And I can't say that he was or wasn't disenchanted. He certainly was into a period in those last years where he didn't have the technology to really keep the car at the hard leading edge. Mm-hmm. And that was a frustration for him. But he was also very interested in his race cars and the mid-engine car. I cannot tell you how many times he said to me, when I took over, Dave, you must do the mid-engine Corvette.
Great. Another thing I just want to throw out there, I believe that a lot of the 20 years old, I work at Scott Air Force Base, and I work with a lot of younger people that are in their 20s, and it seems as though a lot of the trend is getting away from Japanese imports, and a lot of the 20-year crowd is going towards Camaros, Mustangs, and C5 Corvettes. It seems to be C5 Corvettes are the latest and greatest because they're at a point now where financially they can afford them.
For high
and it's a great
teens, you
car.
can buy a really nice C5.
Yeah. Another thing I just want to say is thank you, Mr. McClellan. In my world, you saved the Corvette.
We know that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, what's your name?
I'm from England. Some of you already know that. But one of my questions was, did you ever consider doing a right-hand drive Corvette?
Right-hand drive.
Yeah, it's been considered, but always rejected.
Is that because there's not the market? You don't see the market, or it's just you didn't feel it was possible to make it in the factory?
Never enough of a market, and the car was
Expensive too.
yeah, the car was never properly designed to go right-hand drive. You'd have to switch a lot of stuff around. It would be easier if you start with an all-new car like the C7 and design it so that it can go either way, and the variation left to right has minimal cost impacts. But to take a right-hand drive car that was never, or a left-hand drive car that was never designed for right-hand drive it's a big deal. And the guys in Australia do some of that, but it's very complicated to do it well.
Not only thank you for the question, but thank you for coming over to our event from England, and welcome.
We're sorry. Any other questions?
I have a question, Michael.
Okay.
Who's going to make it to the lunch tent the quickest? Will
I think
or me? Because he said he didn't want you to make this run over so he could go have lunch, is what he told me when we first got up
There you
here.
go, Mike.
Will's bigger, therefore I think he'll get to the golf cart quicker.
I have a question. Show of hands, who owns C6s out here? C5s, C4s. Okay, so there are 2 or 3 with C3s and that kind of thing, right? There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, pretty more evenly spaced than I thought. it would
You know,
be.
Ralph, it's interesting walking through the lots. In my case, with my big blue beast, I'm cruising through the lots. How many earlier cars are here? When we first started Corvette Funfest 19 years ago, we got all what was then late model drivers. But you go out there today, there's a lot of solid axle cars out there, a lot of C3s, a lot of C2s, more than a year has passed. And I think that's pretty cool that those cars are here.
Amen.
All right, if we have no any additional questions, I want to thank.
One more question. Looking for the couple that's owned the most Corvettes, like 20, 10, 15.
Collectively, I'm
15.
still with you.
We've got 15.
How many do you
right
have
here.
now? 2. What's your favorite?
66, the first car I ever had.
There you go.
Yeah.
Always the first one, right?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Guys, thank you very much. And
Thank you,
any
Michael.
questions?
Thanks to you in
Grab
the
these people
audience.
over the-
Thanks, everybody, for sticking with
Appreciate it,
us.
everybody. Thank you a lot.